Okay, part 2. Let's see if I can get it done. Good old Leonardo there. Okie dokie. Alright, basically there's 2 layers here. There's the color layer, which is what you see, this array of oblong sprites that basically determine what the ground looks like. And then on top of that, there are multiple layers. Each layer is represented by an image file in game. So the game looks at these image files, looks at the value or the intensity of the color. You know, they're all grayscale images, and that determines the probability that a given sprite will occur. So there's a separate layer for the sprites for, you know, coniferous trees like these pine trees here, that determines their probability. They're all generated as display lists in game at stage initialization. And their positions, their frequency is pretty much random, again based on the probability of the image associated with that particular sprite type. The colors, there's an elevation map, which of course determines the elevation of the colors and subsequently the sprites that appear on top of those colors. So there's an elevation map, there's a color map, which actually determines the individual color of a color sprite here. So you see all these different shades of green here. Let me go to something a little bit more intense. Those are all determined, they're taken directly from the color of the color image. So you got an elevation image determining the height of everything. You have a color image determining the colors of the individual color sprites here. And then you have probability images for each sprite type. So for sprite types, we have grass, we have the pine trees or coniferous trees, we have deciduous trees or the big leafy trees there in the background. And this is, you know, the whole point of this again is to take the very basic, you know, concept that Afterburner and similar games at the time used to create sort of a fake 3D map, to take that concept to its ultimate conclusion. You know, if you kept using the same technology but making it better and better and better, what would it look like? And hopefully this is it. And there's one other thing, which is one of the main things I was working on, that I'd like to show off right here. Let me pause it again. Okay, you can see, look at the difference, for example, between the size and shape of the sprites in the left embankment versus the shape and size of the sprites that represent the water here. You can see that the color sprites are not all the same shape and size. They do all use the same texture, however that texture is actually scaled independently on the x-axis, or the width, and the y-axis, or the height, based on the elevation difference between it and the most different neighbor. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but so for example, the water here, okay, is a flat plane. That means the difference in elevation between one water tile and its adjacent water tiles is basically 0. And that maximum difference in elevation between a color tile and a color tile next to it determines the scale on its x and y axes, its width and its height. So again, if you look at this left embankment here, where the elevation differences between adjacent color sprite tiles is greater than 0, it looks at the difference, the greater difference between its neighbors on the x-axis and on the y-axis going into the screen. and it uses that to independently scale the X and Y axes. Again, this probably sounds like craziness. I'm probably not explaining it properly, but what that does is it changes the size of an individual, the scale of an individual color sprite, such that it plugs any holes, it plugs any gaps where if they were all rendered the same size, based on the elevation differences of these being higher, you'd actually see through these gaps to the background. Excuse me. So I implemented an algorithm where each color sprite tile looks at its neighbors, in front of it, behind it, to the left of it, to the right of it. For the X axis, it figures out which elevation difference is greater, it uses that to control the X scale, and then which Y elevation difference is greater, and it uses that for the Y scale. And then further, because that actually wasn't enough, it actually uses a weighted average for the X and a weighted average for the Y. It uses both. So the X, for example, its weighted average will be like, let's say 90% of the X difference and 10% of the Y difference. And conversely, the Y will be 90% of the Y difference and 10% of the X difference. All of which, of course, is adjustable. It's a system. And that is what produces what you see here, where you see these subtle, variations in the X scale and then the Y scale of each color sprite. And also actually have decent depth masks here, so those are properly written. And again, if we go up here, I'm going to keep pausing it. Look at this ridge line here. You can see that the color sprites do in fact write correct depth data, which is how objects in 3D graphics include each other. It's basically what gets rendered behind what gets rendered in front of what. And these sprites themselves, these trees, also write the correct depth data, both with respect to the color tiles themselves and enemy ships and weaponry. Let's see if I can... Not so much. Just trying to get a ship to go behind one of the trees. I'll try to do it up here. And the actual watercolor texture that sets the colors here for these color sprites is going to be changed. Look a little bit more dramatic. Okay, we have some turrets. See if we can get some vegetation in front of them. Of course, I won't get so lucky for the purposes of this video, will I? Oh, almost got that one behind one. Maybe from back here. Good luck with that. I'm trying to get it to where you can see that these enemies here actually show up behind the trees. The sprites there. But anyway, I hope that made sense. I mean, it did make sense. I just hope I did a good job of explaining it. And that's pretty much what I wanted to show off here. You could possibly take a look at Area 6. I haven't even tested that yet. Area 6 is a base stage, so it also uses both color sprites and regular sprites for grass and things like that. Go ahead and cheat and get myself some power-ups. I'm probably already invincible. Get through this stuff. There, go ahead and cheat. Alright, you can see here at the bottom, I actually need to adjust the scale. I need to make an almost like a stage-specific color sprite scale coefficient, because the camera tilt, or the angle of the camera, whether it's looking up or down, changes per stage. So here it's actually caused you to be able to see in between the individual color sprites here. And what you're seeing through these holes is the actual planet Mars, which this asteroid base is orbiting around, so there's something to correct. But despite that, you can see basically how this works on an alternate sort of stage. So See, the rocks here, of course, are sprites, just like the trees and such were on the other stage. See how it affects the force fields there. Should be showing grass here. Need to take a look at that side. Again, force field. This used to be flat, by the way, and not have rocks or vegetation. Ooh, I'll have to die. It's a good way to end the video, isn't it? Just to die. Down to one gun. Oh, I still have missiles. You can see a little bit here with the color sprites. That's actually texture taken from a NASA photograph of part of the surface of Mars at very high resolution. That's where the, oh, I have no guns now, just missiles. Lovely. Let's go ahead and expend those on this fool. Oh, man, force field. Oh, I'm done. I'm definitely done now. Come on, missiles either. Kamikaze. Wasn't enough. But again, you can see the gaps there in the color sprites, so I need to do something about expanding the X scale of those with a coefficient. Stage specific. So anyway, I hope you guys dug that. I probably had like 6 or 7 beers, which is why I sound like half an idiot right now, but anyway, hopefully I did a good job of showing off the new tech. Anyway, let me know in the comments, if you like it or not, and until next time.